So I'm here with Jemma Goodman, and she's doing a Bachelor of Communication Studies, which is really exciting, at AUT. Is that right?
Yeah.
And as part of that, she needs to interview someone, and she's chosen me, which is pretty amazing. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jemma, and we'll get started.
So do you want to just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'll give you the short version because you've got lots of good questions here for me. I make a real purpose of describing myself as many things. That's kind of something that I do with people when I'm presenting, but also kind of on social media. So, wife, mother of three, I'm a risk management specialist, also an information security professional. I've got a real interest in digital culture ideas. That's kind of like a kind of passion, love of mine. And I'm also my day job is the Chief Information Security Officer at the Cordia Group.
Cool. So what is something that has happened in your personal life that has impacted your professional life?
Okay, so for the answer to this question, I think for me having babies has really impacted my professional life. For a number of different reasons, as you can imagine. You kind of change all your priorities in terms of what's important, and it's less centered around yourself. But I think that as a kind of career focused person, like I do really love working, that having babies has made me a better manager and leader. Because I had to go through all the trials and tribulations of females in the workplace in terms of worrying about how do I take a break from my job, I'm really maternal, want to have babies, but I also want to leave space for this whole career thing. How do I make sure that doesn't stall while I'm having babies? And from going through that whole process and coming out the other side, I think it's impacted me professionally, because in the workplace I'll make a point of, talking to or supporting or mentoring or coaching women in particular who are pregnant and about to leave the workforce, around what their potential mindset could be when they start to come back, because it is so hard to think about coming back to work and making space for a baby and kind of juggling all of that.
Yes.
Like, it's a really big deal.
Yes.
But is completely possible. You've just got to work your mind through that whole piece. So yeah, that's probably impacted me massively, having babies and then helping people when you come back into the workforce. And part of that is why I introduced myself as many things as well, because I don't think you have to choose to be a parent or a worker or anything else. You can be it all.
Yep, exactly. So what do you enjoy doing at the weekend?
During the weekends, let me just kind of, it's hard to answer this question without answering what I do during the week as well.
Okay, yeah.
I'll go into more depth as we come to that later, but my whole thing is that I will work as hard as I can during the week. I'm really busy. I'll grind away. I'll particularly towards the beginning of the week, I don't mind doing late nights and things like that to kind of get things done. So I'll do all my work during the week, and that leaves my weekends free. And the reason why that's a big priority for me is because of family and friends and things like that. So in the weekend, there's not a lot of work that gets done. I might look at some emails on Sunday night, but not really much at all. And it's very focused around, the phone is down, spending time with the kids, and there'll be...
It's like family time.
Totally, and it revolves around sport and birthday parties that you might have to take them to. We have 2 Labrador dogs as well, so they always need a really good exercise in the weekend, and so very family focused weekends, which sounds boring, but when you get to that point in life you actually really love it because you've had such a busy week.
Yeah, definitely. So then how would your family and friends describe you?
So I think they would describe me as really optimistic. Like I'm an incredibly glass half full kind of person, always have been.
Do you know?
That's a good question. Why? I don't know if it's this, but I remember looking up the definition of my name, Hilary, and it said like hilarious, cheerful, merry. And I think I've just kind of really owned that and taken that on into my work life. And I've always had big dreams, so I think you do have to have a certain amount of optimism about dreams to kind of achieve things. And then the other thing I think they would sort of say about me is kind of that, like I've done personality profiles, I'm a psychologist, and it's through there there's a real sense of being warm and kind of getting on with others and things like that. But so there's that whole optimistic warm piece, but then there's this sort of quiet ambition, so I'll just quietly achieve what I'm doing over here as well, and then it will kind of pop out as being something, and people go, oh, what is she doing? Did you know she's doing that? And that's kind of, I think, how to sort of sum me up.
That's cool. So, what drives you professionally and personally?
So this is an interesting question because I think it's the same things. And I think that's because I have quite a blurry work and personal life in some ways. Because I have my day job and my work life, particularly here at Cordia, and there's a lot I do for them, particularly online and social media and speaking at functions and presentations, plus all the actual security governance piece. But then I have this other thing off to the side, which is this digital culture ideas kind of passion around trying to build a community around technology and people and how they interact and how they influence how we behave and think and communicate with each other. So I've kind of got, and for that I've got the YouTube channel and whatnot, so I've kind of built this personal brand around digital culture ideas. And so sometimes my husband in particular, he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, and it might be work, it might be my kind of personal work, or it could be something kind of completely different. So it's quite blurry. It's like I love all of that. So what drives me then is, and this was one of the questions that really struck me, because I was sort of thinking, oh, is it fame? I know that sounds stupid. I'm not sure it's fame, maybe a little bit of notoriety. And then I was like, well, maybe it's money, because often fame and money kind of come together. And I was like, well, it's not really money. It hasn't really been money throughout my career. Like it's been, it's gotten there, but it hasn't always. Whereas with my husband, who's in IT sales, it was all, it's all about money and the commission and that kind of thing. And I was just like, well, as long as I'm having fun and enjoying what I'm doing, then that's the important thing. And then I was thinking, well, if it's not money, what is it? And then I was like, oh, do I just want to be liked? Which sounds funny, because I think growing up, I've felt like that's a real weakness, that you're not supposed to worry about what other people think about you or try and over-please people too much. And being a female, I've been quite conscious of that as well. But with my sort of psychologist hat on and through doing some of the assessments that we have at our fingertips, I did this strengths survey. And it's online, it's VIA, it's this quite cool strengths survey. And what came out as number one was that I was love. Love is a real strength of mine, which is really interesting, right? But it's wanting to be loved, but it's also giving love as well. So it's like this whole reciprocal kind of thing. And I looked it up just before we were speaking. And then the definition they had in the survey was, I experience close, loving relationships that are characterised by giving and receiving love, warmth and caring. I was like, oh yeah, that is totally it. And so love doesn't just mean romantic love, obviously. There's lots of like companion love and compassionate love, and there's lots of different types of love. But I've always been someone who enjoys being with people, hence probably why I became a psychologist. And in a workplace, like I become one with them very quickly. Like my husband will have me up, he's like, oh, you assimilate so fast. And it's because I end up, like I feel very warm to Cordia. And I guess I probably, I love working here, I love the people. And then I also want to be loved as well. It's kind of this whole thing. So I think that's one of my drivers.
That's such a good answer. So what does your typical work day look like? We kind of touched on that before, but... Okay, so the alarm will go off and my husband and I will hit snooze
once.
Quite early.
Yeah. Just for that extra 5 minutes. And then we're up, and we've got 2 Labradors, so we've got to let them outside the house quite quickly, because they need to do their business.
Yes.
And then it's into the shower, and then the kids are kind of getting themselves up and dressed, and we end up shoveling out lots of Wheat Bix. I love Wheat Bix. Very Wheat Bix and banana heavy family. So there's that, and then it's kind of trying to wrangle the kids into their socks and shoes and jerseys and bags and out to the car and off to school. And then it's into work. So into work might mean a 30-minute drive to my office in Christchurch, which is where I'm based. It might be a 5-minute drive back home to my office at home. Or it could be a flight up to Auckland or Wellington, because it's kind of a national based team. But the day is filled with lots of meetings. I usually have to collaborate across different teams and managers the whole time, because my role is enterprise. So there's lots of different meetings. Then there might be some customer visits as well. So I get to go out and speak to customers, and we kind of have this peer-to-peer relationship, because I'm a Chief Information Security Officer and they might be a Chief Information Security. We kind of share, the pain of what it's like and the challenges, and swap ideas and notes and things like that, which is quite good fun. And then what else? So there might be a presentation that I have to give around security or cybersecurity thought leadership. Doing a lot of that kind of stuff for the organisation, which is great, because I love that variety. I was really pleased to start with Cordia, because they really value that part of me, whereas I've previously just tried to do it through organisations. They're like, what's she doing on that conference? I'm like, oh, they asked me to speak, so so it's great that Cordia really value that. And then what else? So time I get home, if I'm working from home, then the kids are home at 3 o'clock or 3:30 with the nanny, and they kind of bust into the home office for a quick hello and how's it going before they go out and do their homework and things like that with the nanny. Or if I'm coming home, then all those kind of kid jobs have been done, like bath and things, and they're ready for fun with mum and dad and books and hanging out and play and all that kind of stuff.
So when they come home, do you kind of like leave work?
If they're coming home at 3:30, they bust into my office and they tell me all about their day for 5 minutes. They've got short attention spans. But then they go back out into the living room and kind of continue on with their kind of routine. So I can do a few more meetings or get some more work done before I have to finish my day, which is usually kind of 5:30, 6 o'clock. And then it's phone down, computers down, getting the kids into bed and giving them that quality time. And then after that, my husband and I will either jump back on our computers to finish off what we're doing, if it's earlier in the week, or if it's later in the week, then it's a bit of Netflix and a movie. And then into bed to start it all again the next day.
Busy day. So, you seem very confident, like you come across confident. Is there anything that still scares you, whether this is personally or professionally?
Again, another question that kind of made me sit, because sit and think, because I actually think I scare myself on a weekly basis still. For example, public speaking, I really enjoy it afterwards, but I'm super nervous before. Even for this session, I was like, oh, I hope I do a good job. And I will push my comfort levels out, so I'll always try new things. And there's lots of new things to do here at Cordia, because I'm starting to get into presenting on TV and radio stuff, which is super freaky, but it's totally possible once you practice. And or it might be a new initiative that I need to roll out at work, and I'm worried about how it will go down, what people think, And so there is an element of me that really just wants to be good enough. Wants to be super awesome, but at the very basic, just wants to be kind of good enough. And so I've got kind of insecurities around, am I being good enough and what do people think, and I think part of that comes because I want to be loved.
Yes.
I want to feel loved back.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it's kind of embarrassing because in psychology speak we call that approval seeking, and it's seen as this super bad thing, but I'm kind of coming to grips with it and owning it more these days. And so confident, yes, and can do that, but also insecure, and that's just how it is.
Like everyone else.
And when I am insecure, like when I'm feeling worried about something, that's when I kind of reach out to key family members or friends, or even I've got some really great work colleagues who'll just go, oh, I don't know, what do you think? And they'll go, are you kidding me? You nail that every time, you're going to be great. Right? And I'm like, oh, thanks, I needed that.
You just need to hear it sometimes. Just
totally. And then you pick yourself back up and you go, right, okay, that's it. It's on.
So, is there something you are most proud of that is not work related?
Yeah, so I feel like I should say my kids.
Yes.
And I am super proud of them. Particularly proud around how awesomely they're growing up and the great relationship I do have with them. Like I do think, even though I'm a really busy mum.
Are they quite young?
Yeah. So there's William, who's 7, Henry's 6, and then Lily's 3.5.
Okay.
So still, you know, pretty young. And you know, I feel like they still will openly confide in me and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I'm doing a good job in that space. But the thing that probably first came to my mind before I said, well, I should say kids, was some of the kind of digital culture stuff that I've been doing. So I made a really conscious decision about 1.5 years ago. I was working in a like leading IT kind of role, kind of a digital transformation role, and I was thinking about how to communicate with the organisation, and I was writing blogs and stuff because I'd done a lot of that. I like writing, but I sort of went, oh, if I'm going to be digital, I really need to be doing this whole recording thing. So I started doing that internally at my previous organisation, and then I went, oh, why am I wasting it on this audience? Why don't I do this like to the internet, to everyone, and kind of put it out there? So I started the YouTube channel, and then more recently I've done the podcast, which also has a video kind of element. And the reason I'm proud of it is because when I spoke to people about it, they were like, oh, are you sure? Like, could be a bit risky. What if someone trolls you, or what will your friends or colleagues think? And and it's funny how some people who will always think that kind of way, but I felt like it was right, and that I needed to do it, and I was just going to give it a shot. And so I'm proud that I did that, because it's been the most amazing platform.
And it's going well as well. Like it's all.
I mean, look, it's a really long game, so I'm not expecting anything amazing happening there for probably another 3 to 5 years, to be honest, because it's a real patient, you've got to grow it, particularly on all the different platforms and that kind of stuff. So at the moment I'm just like playing and learning, and it's really scrappy and messy, and I don't spend heaps of time in post-production, because you've just got to get it out there kind of quickly. And I'm proud that I've been brave enough to do that. It's interesting because more recently I've been thinking, is this the right thing to be doing? Because you know how there's always times when you kind of doubt yourself and then you move on. And I'm just starting to come back out of that dip and go, no, it is the right thing to do. I need to, get back into that. So I'm proud that I was brave enough to do that, because it actually got my role here with Cordia.
Oh, did it?
So they spotted my videos, and then went, what about this person here to be Chief Information Security Officer? And then that's how my boss found out about me, and then I've got this role doing what I love, which is all this security stuff internally, and then all this external kind of media stuff. And they're really giving me a great platform, because they've put me through media training. I've got a comms department and a marketing. It's great. I really enjoy this role.
That's cool. Who was your biggest influence growing up?
So this is going to be my parents. But for this question in particular, I'm going to say my dad. So one of my other strengths, apart from love, is lifelong learning. And he is just the epitome of that. So
Mhm.
he never left university, and he kept going back. He's a doctor, like a GP,
Yeah.
and he kept going back and doing all these different random degrees. He did it like a
Because you just want like.
loved learning, yeah. So he'd do art history degrees, and he ended up doing my psychology degree, and then he
Wow.
did it, and he goes, I think Hilary should do this psychology degree. Did you really like it? So he
Yeah.
must have known kind of
Yeah.
what I was like. Like he's got about 26 degrees. So
Wow.
on his letterhead, because in the doctor's game it's all about prescription pads and things like that,
Yeah.
and they often have like the doctor's name and then all the degrees afterwards. He would have like 2 or 3 lines of degrees.
Wow.
Like, so yeah, lifelong learning. So he's really influenced me, and he was always like, what do you want to be? You can be it. So I wanted to be an astronaut. That was
Yeah.
my first, job off the
Yeah.
rank. And he was like, okay, if you get really good at maths and your physics, I'll send you to space camp in America.
Yeah.
I don't know if they do these space camps for kids.
Wow.
I was like,
Didn't know that.
great. But then I wasn't so. I realised that I wasn't so great at maths, and
Yes.
physics in particular is quite hard.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, maybe I'm not going to be an astronaut.
Yeah, maybe not.
No, but I did end up joining the Royal New Zealand Air Force, which is kind of like my, not runner-up thing, but I was like, oh yeah, this fits. I really like aviation,
Yes.
So he's always kind of said, go after your dreams. Even with my master's degree, he said, you should get the Air Force to pay for it. And this is before I joined the Air Force, and I was like, oh no, Dad, they only pay for engineers degrees in the Air Force. And then while I was in the Air Force, someone wrote a letter to the head of psych and said, will you pay for my degree? And they were like, oh, look, what great initiative, we'll pay for that. And I was like, oh, Dad was right.
Yeah.
So he's always sort of said, you just got to ask, you've just got to kind of see. And if you don't ask, you don't get, that whole mentality.
Definitely.
So yeah.
Wow. So from that question, what is one quality that you think you owe to your parents?
So for this one, it's mum.
Is it?
Yeah. So mum died about 14 years ago, and she was just the most amazing mother. Like the warmth and the caring and the ability to interact with people, that's all mum. And I didn't, this sounds terrible, but I didn't realise until she actually passed. So I remember my friends coming up to me at the funeral.
Yeah.
I was like, gosh, why are my friends turning up to this funeral? And then they were like, well, we love your mum. She welcomed us into your house, and we hung out there playing pool, and because I was that kind of house. And she always made us feel welcome, because Dad was a little bit more stern, would frighten people away, and she'd be like, oh, don't worry about him, come in. So yeah, and even until she died, she was just the most, like, didn't complain, was just amazing and warm. And so yeah, I think all 3 of my sisters, I think we've got that trait of hers, I like to think.
That's nice. So is there something that you would consider a big obstacle that you've faced, and did you overcome it? How
Yes.
so?
Yeah. What was my one for this? Oh, yeah. So this kind of comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning around being a mum. I think mums have it much harder than dads in some respect, but that whole balance in terms of life and work and the guilt that you feel.
Did you feel the...
Yeah. Sometimes it was me putting it on myself.
Yeah.
But I think it was more of a society thing, to be honest, because I don't think men feel guilty to the same respect when they head off to work necessarily. No. But as a mum, you feel like, oh, you should be the one at home looking after the kids, and is it right that I have a nanny? Is it right that they're in daycare for a little bit? So I've had to really shape and change the way I think about that, because I went through the normal guilt and things like that lots of mums feel. But I think particularly with balance, you've got to be kind to yourself, and if you think of balance so often we think about balance within a day. Like, have I done everything I needed to do today? Everything on my list. And often we fail because we're counting things by the day. But if we think about balance in terms of maybe a week, or a month if you need. It kind of depends what your life's like. But I just do a week, and I reflect back across that week, and I think, have I done all my responsibilities for my role, Claudia, all the responsibilities for my family, for my husband, and then for my other kind of personal interests, endeavours. And if I've done that over a week, then I feel like I've done a good job, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think, in terms of that guilt that mothers feel, I think that's just totally put on us, because we seem to get to this point where we're supposed to choose. Do you want to be a mother? Or do you want to be a worker, business person, whatever it is? And
like
you must choose, yeah. And that's totally untrue. So before each pregnancy, before I gave birth, I would kind of set myself up to come back to something really good. So during my first 2 pregnancies, I was like, well, I'm gonna have all this time off with this baby. So I wrote a book. I wrote to a publisher and said, I've got this idea to write a book, and this is what the chapters are going to be, and this is what I think would be good, and there's a niche in the market, and da. And they accepted it. So over my first pregnancy, I was writing a book, because they sleep a lot in those first 6 weeks, but you're tired. Anyway, it took me 2 pregnancies to finish writing the book. But it allowed me to kind of keep a toe in the world of work, plus be a mum, and have something that was kind of my own, as well as the babies and the families and things like that as well. And so I don't know, in some reasons I don't know how I did it, but maybe it was more planned than I think. But with every time I've come back from a maternity leave, I've got a promotion into another role. So literally 3 babies, I've had 3 promotions every time I've come back. So it totally is all possible. You don't need to lean off, that whole lean in thing. I don't know. Sheryl Sandberg, I did read her.
Oh yes, I did an assignment on her.
Yeah, I think she's got some real nuggets in her book. I think you have to, with everything, you find the gems for yourself. You don't take everything on wholeheartedly. But I did read her book at the right time, and I think that whole creating something great to come back to the workforce for makes it worthwhile to be away from baby as well, if that makes sense.
That does,
yeah.
Wow. So do you recall doing anything that was unplanned that you are glad that you've done?
So it's this whole, in some ways so much has been unplanned. So my career history is kind of a good story. Psychologist in the Air Force, and then I left the Air Force and did business consulting as a business psychologist. And then worked in Australia and London, and then over in London I ended up working for MI5, which is random. How does that happen to a Kiwi?
How does that come about? Something like that.
So I was working for a consultancy, and we had a special relationship with MI5. We were doing the first stage of their assessment centres for their field kind of agents, and through that relationship, we found out they needed an organisational psychologist to come work for them in their behavioural science unit and run this security culture project. So they needed a psychologist with culture change experience. And they kind of put it out to the psychologists in the firm and were like, who wants to do this? And the other psychologists were like, that seems like a weird sideways or backward step. Because psychologists, you're a junior psychologist and an associate and a principal, and that's the way it goes. And I was like, but it's MI5. Surely that's going to be a good story to tell. So I was seconded into MI5, and then I worked in this unit for, I think it was about 1.5 years, and it was like the forward-facing arm of MI5. So they did a lot of the consultancy out to organisations in the community, but everyone there was a spy, And then they would rotate and go back into the mothership, which was the real, where the real secret stuff went on. So I never saw the real secret stuff, but I got to hang out with these amazingly smart people, and and we'd do funny things not funny things. It was around the security culture. But when you walk into the building, into your offices, you had to blank people, which is you weren't allowed to say hello until you were through the door, through security, and then no one could see you type of thing.
Wow.
So there was all this stuff that went
Yeah.
on, which was just super interesting and whatnot. So I hadn't planned to join MI5 and I hadn't planned to get involved in security, but I did and I loved it. And then that got me a role with the Olympics, leading information security. Didn't plan that. Didn't know the job was going to come up, but the job came up and they said, will you do it? And I was like, okay. I kind of had this philosophy that when an opportunity is given to you, that you should probably say yes, unless it's totally crazy, but even then maybe so. Because I think opportunities come to you, and if you procrastinate too long, they'll disappear. So yeah, I've always said yes, and there's always been a risk every time I've said yes, but it seems to have kind of worked out. So through the Olympics, I'm now at Cordia because that's how I got my first technology role, kind of got some credibility, came back to New Zealand, did some other roles, got back into security, and then Cordia. So yeah, so kind of the best things sometimes are unplanned.
Yes. So where do you see yourself in the next 10 years?
Next 10 years, that's actually quite a long time, isn't it? So I'm 40 at the moment, actually turning 40 next week. 41, sorry, next week. So that's like a quarter of my life. So it's quite, when you try to think about how, that's actually quite a long period out. So I could be completely wrong with this, but this might be just in the next 5 years. But anyway. So I do want to build this community of people who are not afraid of technology and who are really inspired by it, and that's the whole digital culture ideas piece. So there's that, and then I hope that through that whole digital culture piece, the conversation widens to be also about don't let barriers be put in your way. If you want to do it, you should find a way, create a dream, make it happen, that kind of stuff. I also want to be a CEO. So that's where I've got my sights on in time.
In this sort of industry?
I'm not sure of the industry. It's not going to be Cordia. It's going to be something else. Just in case my CEO is watching. I'm not sure what kind of industry exactly. I guess I'll know it when I see it. But it'll probably be technology based because most careers are going. Most of life is going technology based.
Yes, it is.
And I'm also do some work on boards, so I want to continue doing that. I think that kind of complements that whole CEO thing really well. And I'd like to get paid for public speaking because I do a lot of it, and that's because I think you've got to practice what you do before you can expect to get paid for things and that kind of thing. But I do want to be kind of a speaker and get paid for that, and that probably comes back to that whole wanting to be loved. And then also there was a part of me growing up that wanted to be a rock star, like most people did. So I'm like, well, that's kind of a rock star kind of thing, maybe. Except without the music. I can't sing that well. So and then if I come back to the family, what I want to achieve for them in 10 years time, because they'll be 17, 16 and 13 and a half teenagers. I want to be there to guide them through the ups and downs of that teenager stuff, because if you can survive high school, then you're doing all right. Like, it's not easy. So I want to be there for that.
That's really nice. So have you ever looked back on a decision that you've made that has changed your life unexpectedly? I guess maybe like work or... So I lived in Australia doing the business consulting thing, and then I moved to London after that, and that was a real game changer. Because I had moved to Australia with my friends and my boyfriend, and it was all cozy and comfortable and not, I mean, it was Australia, it wasn't really overseas, although you felt like you were overseas. It's just Australia. You could always come home in 3 or 4 hours. And I kind of got stuck there for a couple of years and probably didn't leave as quickly as I should to get over to London, which was always in my head the game. But it sort of took my sister coming back from London to Australia and then her going, you need to go to London. I was like, oh, I'm not sure. She's like, no, you're going to London, I'm buying you a ticket,
you're off.
You're
So I went to
going.
London, and then that's when things really kind of blossomed for me. I hate that term, but do you know what I mean? Like that, I met my husband 2 weeks after arriving, and he was like, very similar to Dad, you can be what you want to be, what do you like? And I was like, well, I really like painting. He's like, okay, cool. And he went out and bought me paints. I was like, oh. And so I sort of started painting.
Yeah.
Not very good at it, but he was like wanting my dreams to kind of happen. And then again, it was London that I had the opportunity to work for MO5, and he was like, you should totally do it. And, you know, London Olympics and da-da-da. So things just kind of took off when I went there. And I think it was the change of environment, not necessarily the country, just I was outside my comfort zone, doing different things. And so that unexpectedly, like my life would have gone in a completely different direction if I'd stayed in Australia.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So if you could go back and do something again, what would it be? So quite a broad question.
It is. And I've probably got a short answer for this because I do reflect on my experiences and learn from them, but I will quite quickly move on.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would spend too much time thinking about what I would redo, kind of good or bad necessarily. So that's what I've got to say on that one. I think I've loved I wouldn't change anything because every decision you make creates a future.
Yeah,
you know, if I hadn't had those ex-boyfriends, I wouldn't have found my husband. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like even on a very simple level.
So what does success look like to you?
So success is definitely that I love what I do. Like I love it. Because then it doesn't seem like work.
Yeah.
And I guess getting paid for it is always a bonus.
Yeah.
My husband is always like pretty hot on me getting paid for things as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of it. So essentially, if I'm loving what I'm doing and being happy with it, then that's kind of the recipe for success. And it always has been, because some of those roles that I did do weren't paid that well.
Yeah.
Until more recently.
Yeah.
And my husband was like, oh gosh, you keep getting these roles which are, you know, great, but they're not that well paid. And
Yeah.
I was like, just wait, honey.
It'll happen.
Yeah. So you gotta love what you do.
And lastly, do you have a life philosophy, and do you know or wonder how you've arrived at it, if you do?
Yeah. So I think I only answered the first part here, so we'll have to ad-lib for the second. So my life philosophy is that message that I kind of drum home around being many things.
Yeah.
Like I said at the start, like so mum, mother, risk management, security, information security, digital culture ideas, stuff, YouTuber. I've written a book, I've developed an app, like you don't have to choose one thing as long as you're happy with doing all of those things.
Yes.
Because quite often the message that I get from people is you're doing too much.
Yeah.
You need to focus on some things and do them really well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, first of all, I can't because I love variety. Like I need that to be happy and to give 150%. I need that variety. Otherwise, I wouldn't. If I only had 3 things, I'd be like, oh, and I wouldn't give 100%.
Yeah.
So I need that variety. But I've always sort of been made to feel quite bad about doing too much as well. But what other people don't see sometimes is that it's all going in a direction.
Yeah,
so, you know, all the Cordia stuff, and that's a big role.
Yes.
Everything going on there with looking after security for Cordia and making sure we're, you know, robust and resilient and secure, and plus the marketing for Cordia, plus all the digital culture ideas stuff, and then the podcast, which seems like a thing over here, but it's not, it's all part of it.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, none of that's possible without my family and my husband, his support and kids and things like that. So my philosophy has been, don't choose me one thing.
Yeah.
Don't limit yourself. And then how I've arrived at that is probably because that's exactly me. I need to do all those things.
So it's just like
So
you.
that's me figuring out my head and justifying why I'm doing all this stuff. But it's all building towards something. But it's not building towards it today. It's like building for like 3, 5, 10 years down the track in some ways. Yeah. And if things don't work, just stop them. Do something else. You know, pick something else up.
Well, that's all my questions. So that was really good, thank you.
Well, you're so welcome.